Hi, my name is Jane, and I wanted to tell you a story um, about my life when I was actually from preschool to early elementary school living in my hometown, Crookston, Minnesota. My very best friend at the time lived two homes down from ours. Her name was Anita Bank. And this is a small Midwestern town, very lily white. There was not really any diversity whatsoever, it seemed, in our town. But Anita was, I thought, the most beautiful little girl. She was a few months older than I was, and she was Jewish, one of probably two or three Jewish families that lived in our town. So that alone introduced me to a whole lot of um, religious kind of information and different cultural kinds of experience than I probably ever would have had. But the most profound impact that my friendship with Anita had on me was the fact that as a toddler, she contracted polio. And the long term effect was on one of her legs um, that was never really developed the muscles and so on. So she had to wear a brace. Um, she had to, on a regular basis, go to a neighboring town for therapy at the Sister Kenny Institute. Sister Kenny was somebody who worked a lot with polio patients and the therapy after they had contracted the disease. And so I would go with her to the weekly therapy sessions where I would sit in the whirlpool with her and go through the various exercises and so on. But I guess the primary point of the story is the fact that here was my best friend who just little things like the fact that she was so pretty, but she had to wear this big, heavy, clunky metal brace on her leg, and it attached to her shoe. So she always had to wear these black or brown, very heavy, kind of clunky orthopedic shoes. And she would cry when, all the other kids would be getting ready for school and the girls would have their new shoes for school and so on. And here she had to wear these ugly shoes and kind of drag along this heavy brace. And I know that today there are a lot of people who question the necessity and safety of childhood immunizations. But the fact that we have taken those medical advances so for granted, um, kids no longer have friends that have gone through some of those horrendous childhood diseases that have a lifelong impact on them. They perhaps a child knows another classmate who may have had cancer, for example. Obviously, there are still some horrible diseases that affect children, but so many of the diseases that used to impair and kill children, as long as they're immunized, no longer affect large numbers of the population. And so I think one of the concerns that I have is that people may have heard rumors or heard read unsubstantiated reports about immunizations, and because they have no personal history with how bad some of those diseases can be, they decide not to get their children immunized. And unfortunately, they or other children could be severely impacted, like my friend Anita, um, who, until adulthood still, of course, was impacted. She really was prohibited from sports, from playing just typical childhood games and into high school and so on. But did well, went to college, had her family, and so on. But they are finding, and she is experiencing, the fact that into adulthood, late adulthood, polio kind of rears its ugly head again and has other physical impacts on people. And so she is once again um, going through some real serious health problems because of this childhood disease that thankfully, shortly after, when we were still in elementary school, the polio vaccine was introduced, and we're probably the last generation where there really were quite a number of people that were impacted. The other kind of lifelong influence it had on me was, introducing a sensitivity to people with disabilities. And so in my career, where I focused on providing good, sound housing for people with some disadvantages. One of the types of housing I particularly focused on developing and providing to folks was housing that's accessible for people who have mobility issues or other types of disabilities, because whether it's polio or other kinds of diseases and conditions, um, those folks have a lot to cope with. So having homes that are designed to accommodate their needs, I think, is a really important thing. But primary message, I think, is indeed the importance of immunizations and keeping kids immunized.